What's up, everybody? Welcome to another show of SEC Talk with your hosts, Holden and Cody. Hope everybody's doing good today. Cody, how we doing after a pretty boring weekend as far as SEC football goes, with there only being just a handful of games, really. Not even a handful.
The SEC played this weekend?
Yeah, kind of didn't even feel like it, did it? Just the few games that we did end up having this weekend, it didn't feel like a normal weekend, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think we had, 7 on the schedule to begin with? And
Yeah.
then 4 got postponed
We had the
due
full
to coronavirus.
That's right. We had the full slate going, and it didn't end up being the full slate that we ended up with on it at all, which was mighty strange. But sometimes
Well, I think. Go ahead.
I said sometimes that's just the way it goes in this day and age, and this just strange year that we're having.
It's 2020. That's about all you can.
Yeah.
That sums up this year. It's 2020.
Yep.
But yeah, like you mentioned, we only had 3 games this weekend, so with those 4 being postponed, not a lot of changes here in the top 25. We'll cover top 25 for y'all real quick, and also going over some news and some big news that just was released tonight on November 15th that we kind of thought was going to come around, but we'll get to that here in a few minutes.
Yeah, like he was saying, running through top 25, a little bit of news. We'll obviously review those few things. We do have our Crimson Dog of the week. We got a couple of them for you guys. We'll go back through our picks, some East and West rankings that I finally updated after a couple of weeks, and some percentages as of today to make the college football playoff. So a lot to get to, even though there's not a lot at the same time. We're going to add some stuff to it to kind of make it fun for you guys. Y'all go ahead and follow us on Twitter and Facebook at SEC Talk 20. Whenever you guys get a chance, I'll go ahead and throw up on the screen for you guys watching visually. There's the 3 games from this weekend, as well as your updated top 25 right there. Cody, you want to go ahead and run through our new top 25 there? I know not much changed in the top 10, but rounding that out, there was a
little bit of a change in the top 10. As far as the top 8, though, your top 8 stays the same going into week 12 of college football, finishing up week 11. Number 1 top dog of the year this week is Alabama. They were idle last week with the game against LSU being postponed due to LSU's numbers being too high. Notre Dame takes number 2 spot, sitting there. I think they had a game against Boston College and won that one fairly easily. Ohio State also had a idle weekend as their game against Maryland got postponed. Clemson sitting there at number 4 hole. Texas A&M number 5 hole, with their game also being postponed due to their numbers being too low. Number 6, you have Florida with their victory this past weekend over Arkansas. Number 7, you have Cincinnati. Number 8, you have BYU. And jumping into the top, they were in the top 10 last week. They're moving up a spot. The number 9 is Indiana. Jumping up to number 10 is Wisconsin, which is 2-0 on the season. So they must see something in Wisconsin that the rest of us don't, jumping them up 3 spots in this week. Sitting number 11, you have Oregon. Number 12, falling 3 spots, you have Miami. Georgia, who was idle, gets pushed back another spot to 13th. Oklahoma State sitting idle at 14th. Marshall jumping up, tied up now, according to this, tied up with Coastal Carolina. Both of them sitting at 15th. With that being the case, Iowa State is holding up at 17th. Oklahoma holding on 18th spot. Northwestern jumping up 4 spots to number 19. You see USC sitting at number 20. Liberty jumping up a spot to 21st. Texas falling 1 to 22nd. Auburn jumping up a spot to 23rd. Louisiana Raging Cajuns jumping up 24th spot, and jumping into the top 25 after their big win is Tulsa.
Yeah, I was surprised they were Tulsa getting the win over SMU. That's your updated top 25 for you guys right there. Like you said, not much really happening in the top 10 outside of Indiana jumping up a spot and Wisconsin basically swapping up with Miami there, coming from 12 up to, actually they were in 13, I believe, because Georgia actually fell 1 spot down to 13. Well, let's jump into some of the news. I mean, the big news that we did have coming out of South Carolina this weekend that we talked about last week was, watch out. You know, we both had a good feeling that Will Muschamp's seat was hot. Sure enough, it was. We had the question last week. In this strange year, can you or would you fire a coach? I think at the end of it, I don't think we thought that in the middle of the season it would happen unless it was maybe Vandy. But we were, I mean, we kind of caught it, but at the same time, I didn't think it would have happened in the middle of the year.
Yeah, I think we're back and forth. I don't think we actually gave a definitive answer on that. I think it really just depends on the circumstances there. And I guess South Carolina, you know, looking at the record over the past few years, they're like, you know what, we're done with this.
Yeah.
He hasn't produced a whole lot there in South Carolina, so they decided to get rid of old Muschamp.
Yeah, athletic director Ray Tanner, he did announce on Sunday Mike Bobo's going to come in and he's going to serve as the interim head coach for the remainder of the season. Muschamp was 28-30 overall in his 5th season at South Carolina. So I think the SEC is the first one to come out, and they're kind of, I guess, setting the tone for everybody, you know. And I think this could be a tone that kind of like a shock, you know, heard around the world. Harbor there up there at Michigan, you know, he's not having a really good year. I don't think that you would get rid of. I'm completely blanking on Penn State's head coach. I don't think that you would get rid of him. Yeah, that's right, James Franklin. I don't think you would get rid of him just because he's been great in the years past. This just turns out to not be as good of a year as they anticipated Penn State having.
I think with Penn State's situation, I think you kind of give him a mulligan on this year. You know, you didn't have a full year practice. You had a lot of issues. You started late. So kind of give him, you know, the benefit of the doubt this year because it is a rough year to play in. But as far as Muschamp goes, I mean, yeah, you had the same situation as every other team in the SEC, but, you know, you just ain't been able to perform. You're 2-5 on the year.
Yeah. And that is also a difference in it, is, you know, James Franklin, he's had winning seasons. The past couple of years, I think he's had 10-win seasons. It could be longer than that, whereas Muschamp's not looking at the 10-win season over the past couple of years. And, again, this is in the middle of his 5th season. It'll be kind of interesting to see what happens with Muschamp from here. You know, Mike Bobo coming in as the interim head coach. Who knows? That could be another one of those LSU situations with Go Tigers. That could be a situation there with Ed O, where Mike Bobo might end up being the sticking spot there. Not sure. We'll see how things shake out as far as that goes. But one other thing that I did actually see on Twitter earlier for another show that I do, anyways, was they were talking about how good of friends Will Muschamp and Kirby Smart are. And, you know, Will Muschamp's son plays football at Georgia. You know, they got good ties and stuff. What, you know, could you see Muschamp maybe going on staff there at Georgia? I don't know. Might be something to keep an eye on. But like we said, obviously he is out there at South Carolina. And again, I think it's something that's going to kind of open up to the rest of the country where teams may look at that and they say, all right, well, we're not going to go that route. We're going to at least wait till the end of the season. Or it might open the floodgates and teams decide, all right, he's been on the hot seat. We're not sure about this. Let's go ahead and make the move now. Now, at the end of the day, I think he's still got like a $21 or $22 million payout to come his way. So I don't think he's going to be hurting on the financial side of things. Now it'll just be figuring out where he's going to land. So with that being said there at South Carolina, let's jump right into that South Carolina-Ole Miss game, which South Carolina scored a lot more than I anticipated them scoring. But in the end, they obviously fall to Ole Miss.
Yeah, like we mentioned about South Carolina and Ole Miss, we knew that this was going to be an absolutely zero defensive game this year. We've seen it several times with Ole Miss, you know, when they played Alabama, for instance, earlier in the year. There is no defense on that game at all from neither side. In this game, pretty much same exact story. The only difference, I think, is that quarterback there at Ole Miss, Matt Corral, who went 28 for 32, 513 yards and 4 touchdowns. So he was picking apart that South Carolina defense, and I think we all saw something that we're real familiar with Lane Kiffin doing on the sidelines, calling a touchdown for the balls he even left the quarterback's hands.
Yeah, that was pretty good there. He knew it was happening, knew it was coming. That's for sure. You know, and on the other side of it, Colin Hill didn't look bad as far as quarterback goes for South Carolina. I mean, he does make a mistake on the night, but he does have a touchdown and throws for 230 yards. The other side of that is running the ball. South Carolina's leading rusher there runs for almost 250 yards and has 5 touchdowns on the ground for South Carolina. So the ground game was a movement for South Carolina, whereas obviously we know Ole Miss's defense is about like Oklahoma. Oklahoma's got a great powerhouse offense that can throw the ball down the field, being an Ole Miss, but they don't have a defense. So,
they only had 195 yards rushing as a team on 48 carries.
Yeah, they're at Ole Miss.
Yeah, at Ole Miss.
Yeah.
But they had 4 of the touchdowns. Matt Corral had 4 of them through the air. So that's the big difference there in that ball game than a field goal. But nonetheless, like you mentioned, South Carolina did prove that Ole Miss's running defense is non-existent. You give up 318 yards total and 243 to one running back plus 5 touchdowns. Yeah, it's pretty much a ball game there.
Yeah, and we knew Elijah Moore was going to be a key receiver before the season even started. He proved that 225 catches, 2 touchdowns, and then I'm completely blanking on his. Braylon Sanders was the secondary guy. They were 141 yards. So between the two of them, they're talking right at 400 yards alone in just those 2 guys there. So the air game was definitely happening there for. Go ahead, sorry.
Oh, you're good. I was just saying, you're definitely right. Ole Miss had an air game going real good. On the other side of the ball, South Carolina's Shi Smith had 117 yards on 10 receptions. So he was actually looks like their biggest target there for South Carolina.
Yeah, he actually reared back to throw 1 pass, but came up incomplete on it.
Well, you can't have it all of it now.
No, that's for sure. So in the end, in a weekend that you don't get to watch a lot of teams play, watching those, and it was strange that was actually the game that you got to watch in prime time. But nonetheless, if you wanted to see an offensive battle back and forth, that was the game to watch right there. And I was really surprised how close South Carolina kept the game, whereas it could have been a lot worse. I thought it was going to be a lot worse than it was. I think you thought it was going to be a little bit tighter. I think you were a little closer on it. But in the end, Ole Miss does get the win 59-42 over South Carolina. Let's go ahead and jump right on into Vandy, Kentucky, because that was another one I never anticipated to be nearly as close as it was. But Vandy's offense showed up, whereas Kentucky's defense did not.
Yeah, this game, I think we were all thinking Kentucky's going to come in, big boy Vanderbilt, and just demolish them, where in other terms, the Wildcats struggled a little bit there and almost lost it. Vanderbilt's one of those teams you really can't sleep on just because you never know how they're going to do. Ken Seals went 21 for 32 on the night with 225 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then Mike Wright also went 1 for 1 with a 2-yard pass for a touchdown. So Vanderbilt's offense, they have a little spark behind them. They could do something. It's just getting that spark going earlier in the game. Because going into halftime, Kentucky had a 24-14 lead, 24-14 lead on Vanderbilt, and Vandy came out after halftime and made some stops when they need to, but just couldn't finish off that game.
Yeah, on that other side of it, Terry Wilson does go 13-15, 110 yards, 2 touchdowns on the night. Chris Rodriguez, he ran the ball really well for him, 149 yards, 2 touchdowns on the ground for him as well. Terry Wilson followed him up 83 yards, 1 touchdown on the ground there. You got some really good guys going there for Kentucky, and they've got so much talent, but they just don't seem to be putting the talent on the field as far as it comes defensively. It seems like they can put some offense out there, but defensively they're having a lot of trouble, and that's been the topic of the year around the SEC is defenses for teams. Georgia was the only one really putting up a defense, and in the 2 games that mattered the most, that being Alabama and Florida, the defense was not nearly as stout as people thought. So it's just been such an offensive year for teams, and clearly we're seeing that. You're looking at Kentucky winning 38-35, just like we just said a minute ago. Ole Miss wins 59-42. When is the last time we saw SEC teams putting up, almost 40 points for both teams, or as many points as you're seeing on the board, and not either shutting teams out or defensively keeping teams within, under 20 points in a game.
Yeah, I mean, you're seeing games now. I mean, this year alone, you're seeing games. I think all the games this year have been right at probably combined score of 70 to 80 points. And it's been split. It ain't been one-sided for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
There's only been a handful of one-sided victories, so that one's kind of interesting to see what's going on there.
Yeah, no, that's true.
I was looking at the wrong one.
No, you're good. Kentucky does move, and they improved to 3-4 on the season. Vandy falls to 0-6, still not looking good. I still don't see a win in Vanderbilt's book as they continue through the rest of the season. Looking at what
their next three is going to be their toughest games of the year, I think.
Yeah.
And also remember that Kentucky last week also lost their offensive line, or the offensive line coach.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
To a 2-year battle with cancer. So I saw where I think the first play of the game, they lined up without their left guard.
I think that's what it was. Yeah. Truly a touching moment there. That was special. I'm glad. You knew there was going to be something in it, and it's anytime something like that happens within an organization, to see somebody take just something as simple as a play like that, it means a lot, and to see that it's very moving to be able to see something like that. So I'm really glad that they were able to put something on the field to be able to commemorate him in that way.
Oh, yeah.
So that was special there for Kentucky.
But in the end, Kentucky gets the very emotional win by a field goal, squeezing it out 38-35 on the year. I guess if you don't have anything else, we can jump on down to the primetime matchup of the night, I guess you can say.
Yeah, let's roll on down to Gainesville, where Florida, that offense, like we talked about a minute ago, just kept it rolling. One touchdown shy of putting 70 on the board.
Yeah, I kind of had an idea this was going to be a high-scoring game just because we really ain't seen a Florida defense all year. They've been kind of hit and miss, so you didn't really know what was going to happen. But Kyle Trask and that Florida Gator offense goes out there and showing what they're made out of, and giving it to old Arkansas Razorbacks. Kyle Trask goes 23 for 29 on the night with 356 yards and 6 touchdowns. So he's trying to get there going big boys with them. I think last time I seen a quarterback this good at Florida is when they had Tim Tebow.
Yeah, no, I can agree with that. That's more than likely the case, and I've picked him the past couple of weeks to be the Crimson Dog because he's putting up so many yards. It's unbelievable to watch. He set the record, obviously, the SEC in the first 4 games, throwing 18 touchdowns, which is the most in the SEC history. Through that many games starting the season like that, and he just continues to rack it up. I saw a crazy stat earlier, and not meaning to go back against Georgia on this, but it's the easiest stat that I find, because as far as offense goes, all teams seem to be firing on all cylinders, and Georgia seems to be the only one lacking as far as not really putting up much offensive progression in the games. Now, defensively, they show up most of the time, but Kyle Trask in the last 2 games alone has thrown as many touchdowns as Georgia has scored all season.
Yeah, that's embarrassing.
Yeah, it really is. And I hate to harp on Georgia with Georgia having the bye week this past week, not on their own terms. But so let me jump back into one other thing, and that was Felipe Franks obviously was the quarterback at Florida last season, transfers to Arkansas this season. He does travel back to the Swamp for the first time since then. Goes 15 for 19, 250 yards, has 2 touchdowns on the night, no interceptions. So had a pretty productive night there as far as that goes. Running the ball, Arkansas did run the ball for 208 yards. So offensively, just in the rushing and the passing category, they're putting up over 450, right at 460 yards. Rakeem Boyd did fumble the ball one time. They're running the ball. He only ran for 10 yards through the game. Don't know if he got hurt or anything like that throughout it. But I was expecting Arkansas's defense to stand up a little bit more than they do.
Yards?
What you got?
How many yards you said Rakeem Boyd had?
I see 56. Sorry, I was looking at the receipt. I was looking at the receiving side of things. Rushing wise, he ran for 56 yards. Sorry about that. Did have a touchdown on the night, but receiving, he only had 10 yards. All right.
Yeah, I think yours doing like mine does. It kind of jumps down.
Yeah, it'll slide. But But yeah, unfortunately, like I was thinking, I thought Arkansas's defense would stand up a little bit more than they did. Didn't quite happen, obviously, if Florida beats them 63-35. I was pulling for that 17.5 to keep it a little closer. Sam Pittman, obviously, continue prayers to him. I don't think he's got any symptoms, but he's still out with coronavirus. We'll see how that shakes out for them because, like I said in previous episodes, I think that he's kind of the heart and soul and the momentum that there is in that Arkansas football team to get that team hyped up and going.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Arkansas as far as defensive wise. I mean, Florida only had 208 yards on the night rushing against them. So for them, and let's see, Florida had 45 carries, whereas Arkansas had 32. So defensive wise, Florida and Arkansas, their running game defense is okay.
Yeah.
It's the passing game that Florida's taking advantage of. And I really believe that if you shut down that passing game, if you can get pressure on Kyle Trask, that's going to shut Florida down.
Yeah. You saw that a little bit when when Georgia actually put a little bit of pressure on Florida. Kyle Trask had a little bit more trouble, but when they just sat back and only rushed 4 at him, he had all the time in the world to be able to find those pockets and hit them.
Yeah.
Obviously, having Kyle Pitts back there for him as well in that tight end spot made a big difference too. That dude's a beast as well.
Oh yeah, I mean that helps you when you have big targets like that, but it also helps when you're playing a team whose defense just does not comprehend.
Mm-hmm.
Because there were several plays where there was wide open Florida defenders just because of a busted coverage.
Yeah.
And I think just about every one led to a touchdown. But I mean, when you have a quarterback in Kyle Trask that has the accuracy that he does too, it makes it hard to defend.
No, that's for sure.
That against Arkansas, so.
That's for sure, and I know this is looking ahead, but I will say in Arkansas, one fun one I'm looking up forward to is this upcoming week where LSU and Arkansas match up. Arkansas, I know this is looking way ahead of time, but Arkansas does open as a 1.5-point favorite there at home against LSU. A couple of other ones, again, just looking forward. Ole Miss is traveling to Texas A&M. Watch out for that one because Ole Miss can put up a lot of points there. It depends on if A&M's defense can show up in that one and if A&M's offense will also show up. The only other one that I'm really excited about is maybe that Tennessee-Auburn game. Maybe Missouri-South Carolina, but more Tennessee-Auburn. Again, that's looking way forward. Let's go ahead and jump right into our Crimson Dog of the Week. Cody, I know you were just talking a little bit about who you were thinking, and I think you just touched on your guy there. If you want to tell us who it is.
I think we're just going to make him a permanent Crimson Dog of the Week just because of the stats he's throwing up. I think you had him 2 weeks in a row.
Yep.
He's going to go third week in a row on our show, guys. We're going to go with the quarterback from Florida, Kyle Trask, and the numbers he's putting up there. I mean, went 23 completions on 29 attempts, like we said, with 356 yards, 6 touchdowns, and a QBR of 96.7. And I think he has some rushing yards too. Yes, has 7 rushes for 8 yards. So not a whole lot of running there, but passing wise, I mean, like I mentioned, it's hard to defend a good, accurate quarterback, and that shows we've seen that happen in the past whenever they had Tim Tebow there. And that's who he kind of reminds me of seeing him play. He looks like a Tim Tebow.
Yeah, he's a tough dude, and sitting back in the pocket, if you give that dude enough time, he's going to throw it all over you. Like you said, he makes it the 3rd time this week. I decided I've got to change it up a little bit after having him 2 weeks in a row. And the only guy, there's probably a couple other guys I could have put out there, but the only guy that I wanted to put up outside of that is another quarterback in Matt Corral there at Ole Miss. 28 for 32, 513 yards through the air. He's averaging 16 yards right there, 4 touchdowns. 97.6. They had the same QBR in this game. How about that? Runs the ball 10 times, 20 yards, another touchdown there. So 5 total for him, 6 total for Kyle Trask. Couple of really good dogs there.
If I'm not mistaken, this is Matt Corral's second 500-yard game on the year.
It very well may be. That could very well may be the case.
The first one, who was it they played? I think it was against Arkansas. He had 500 yards.
It may have been. I'm not 100% on it, but congrats out to Florida's quarterback there in Kyle Trask, as well as Ole Miss quarterback Matt Corral for being the Crimson Dogs of the Week. Let's go ahead and jump into our picks of the week from this past week. Didn't look too bad, Cody. You are now 19-6, and because I decided to take the strange other pick and finally even us up, I'll be 18-7 after pulling for Arkansas. I did take Arkansas in the over, or excuse me, not the Arkansas. I took Arkansas in the points at 17.5. Obviously, the couple touchdown win there for Florida, or few, I should say, a handful. That's a little bit more than 17.5 there, so I did lose that one. I did take the win for Ole Miss over South Carolina, get the win there. Moves me again to 18-7. Cody, you swept it. 3 for 3 in the baseball term, 3-0 in the football terms, putting you to 19-6. You were a lot closer in some of these games. Like we were talking about, I think Kentucky and Vandy, you picked it there 31-24, ends 38-35. A lot closer than I anticipated, but you picked it a lot closer. Arkansas, Florida, you had Florida getting a pretty good win, and they did end up getting a win by even more, nonetheless. And then in that bottom, you had it a lot tighter than I did. And sure enough, it was a lot tighter. But either way, you get it. 3-0 on the weekend. I go 1-1. Let's look at MadDawgs. I know on the show, podcast-wise, if you listened to us last week, we didn't get it in on the air because it was right after we had finished recording. I actually got the message from him on it, and we did put it up on our socials, but didn't get it in the podcast. I'm at least going to get the results on it. Boom, there it is. He took the points with everybody. He took Vandy for plus 17 in this one against Kentucky, obviously gets the win there. He took Ole Miss with 11 there against South Carolina, gets the win there. And he did the same as I did, taking Arkansas and 17.5 on Florida, falls there. So he goes 2 for 1 on the weekend. Had a winning weekend, though. Moves into 6-7 overall on the year. So not too bad of a day there for MadDawg as far as his picks go through the week. I finally did update your East and your West rankings here. I'm going to run through them real quick, Cody, and we'll finally get back to you here. Florida does lead the East at 5-1. Georgia right behind them 4-2. Kentucky there in the 3 spot, 3-4. Missouri 2-3, following that up. Tennessee at 2-4. South Carolina 2-5. Poor Vandy down there at the bottom, 0-6. They're just kind of hanging around, aren't they? Let's jump over to the West real quick. Alabama 6-0. Standing at the top, A&M right behind them at 5-1. Auburn 4-2. Arkansas and Ole Miss at 3-4. LSU 2-3. Mississippi State holding up the bottom at 2-4. And one of the other segments that I wanted to jump through, Cody, that I think I sent to you a little bit ago if you wanted to run through it with me. We now have updated chances to make the college football playoffs. I'll let you run through those real quick if they finally sent to you. I don't know if they made it or not.
Yeah, I got it.
All right.
Yeah, we're starting at the top of the list. You have, according to, I think they use the All-State Predictor that they use for ESPN. Right now, you're looking at Alabama having an 89% chance of getting into the playoffs. Ohio State at 61, Wisconsin at a 55, Notre Dame at a 49 as of right now, Clemson at a 43, Oregon at a 30, BYU, a non-Power 5 team there with a 25% chance, Florida with an 18% chance, Cincinnati, another non-Power 5 team there with a 12% chance, and Texas A&M with a 7% chance. So 3 of your 10 teams that have a chance to make it are SEC.
Yeah, and these percentages, they're actually pretty good. You know, we were talking about it earlier. Wisconsin not having really played any games because of the coronavirus, kind of slowing them down the past couple of weeks. It's surprising seeing them way up there, but from what they've seen so far, they see enough to tell you, hey, these guys look good. The number that's kind of interesting to me is that Notre Dame's at that 49%, whereas Clemson's at 43%. Obviously, that's because Notre Dame beat them, but I think you and I think we're kind of both in the same boat as far as thinking that the rematch, more than likely in the ACC Championship, is going to have Clemson over Notre Dame. Listen, I don't follow the ACC deeply enough to know if they have like an East and a West or a North and South or anything like that.
I think last time we looked at it, they did.
They do or don't?
They don't.
Okay, so if that's the case, it'll be the top 2 that would play, which we would think that Clemson would probably edge them out the next time just because it's hard to beat a team twice in a year. But I guess that's all of this is probably just based after this 11th week that we've been playing. So once championship weekend comes around, who knows, that may change up a little bit.
Yeah, they don't have a... I thought they actually had a split, but I guess they don't.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
I'll tell you, as far as the SEC goes there, like you said, Alabama 89%, Florida 18%. Those two more than likely are going to be the team to play each other. Then you got A&M that's still in the mix. They do have a 7% chance there. They only lost to Alabama. If A&M can win out and Alabama can beat Florida, there is the chance, depending on what happens with Notre Dame and Clemson. I think it's the biggest question, what happens with Ohio State and Wisconsin. I think that's your test right there. If Notre Dame was able to beat Clemson again, you might get that little bit of an edge to say, let's throw a second SEC team in there, and it could be A&M. The only question is, if Alabama's at 1 and A&M's at 4, I think it's a lot harder to say, let's see that rematch. But, I mean, I don't know. It could happen. But I think if Clemson came in and they beat Notre Dame in the championship, more than likely you're going to end up seeing like an Alabama, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Clemson. You might have 2 ACC teams in there. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how that shakes out. Could you imagine the possibility of Notre Dame and Clemson playing a third time in one season if that was to happen?
Here's my thing looking at this real quick. Notre Dame's still undefeated on the year, so as hold on, let me get it pulled back up real quick. Okay. So your undefeated teams left out of that list is Alabama at 6-0, Notre Dame at 8-0, Ohio State at 3-0, Cincinnati at 7-0, BYU at 8-0, Wisconsin and Oregon both at 2-0, and I think that was it, right? Yeah, because then
I think you got like Marshall and Coastal and stuff, but I think they're going to be too far down the line ranked-wise for it to matter. That's kind of my thought as far as this goes. I think Wisconsin may edge up there, but Ohio State and Wisconsin are eventually going to play, and that's going to play itself out. I think you give Ohio State the edge, but my question is, are they going to allow Cincinnati and BYU to be high enough ranked for that to matter when these top dogs? I mean, you take Notre Dame and Clemson. When Clemson lost to Notre Dame, Clemson fell to 4th. They didn't fall below an undefeated BYU or an undefeated Cincinnati, and that's because they think that Clemson is better. And if Clemson beats Notre Dame, I don't see how Notre Dame can fall below a BYU or a Cincinnati.
A little bit real quick, just touching on, since we're talking about that area, Ohio State is actually second in their division, behind Indiana. Wisconsin is second in their division, behind Northwestern. Ohio State and let me put back up. Ohio State does not play Wisconsin in the regular season.
Yeah, it would be in a Big Ten championship game.
If they meet up, it's in the Big Ten championship game.
Mm-hmm.
But as of right now, your matchup for the Big Ten is actually Indiana and Northwestern.
Well, that's also because of the games played. Northwestern's played 4. Indiana's played 4, Wisconsin's only played 2, and Ohio State's only played 3. At the end of the year, the unfortunate thing for these teams is they're not in the Big Ten. Those games aren't being made up. But the thing that I find interesting also in this percentage is you got Wisconsin at 55%, who is ranked 10th. Indiana, that is ranked 9th at 4-0, doesn't even have a percentage on this chart right here.
Yeah, no, I don't.
It could be a 1 now. We don't have anything ranked below 7% right here. So there's teams that are ranking 5%, 2%, 1%. So they're probably in that 1% mark. But, I mean, it just goes to tell you, Wisconsin, I believe, had they played a full 4 games already and been 4-0, I think they're going to be above. They could be sitting in that 6, maybe even 5 spot, bumping a bump above those teams that have 1 loss in the SEC, depending on how they feel about it. I'm not 100%, but...
Yeah. I mean, you never know looking at the rankings and how they go because, I mean, like we talked about in the past where you had teams who were undefeated or hadn't played yet and were getting jumped by a team that hasn't even played.
Yeah. You take BYU. BYU, an 8-0 team sitting in the 8th spot, whereas they're below a 7-1 Clemson that lost to Notre Dame. Below a 5-1 A&M who lost to number 1 Alabama, below a 5-1 Florida who lost to the team right above them in A&M. So they're obviously not giving them the credit yet. And it's so hard to have this conversation about, oh, well, they haven't played anybody. Very true, but they can't. You know, this isn't a year that they're going to let BYU go and play an SEC team unless it's in a playoff. This isn't a year they're going to let BYU go and play an ACC team unless it's in the playoffs. So that's what makes it so complicated about this year, and how this is, if any, I mean, I don't want to be in the committee at all any year, but if there's a year to really not want to be in it, this is the year when you have conferences, because I really think it's going to boil down to your Power 5 conferences -1. That's what it's going to come down to. And right now, it could be -2. We could take the Pac-12 out of it. We could end up taking I'm completely blanking on Oklahoma, Texas, Big 12. That's
Big 12.
So, you know.
Big 12's out. I'm going to call that right now. Big 12's out.
Yeah, so you could be
your
dropping a couple there.
Big 12 right now is Oklahoma State at 14th.
Yeah, and they're 5-1. They're more than likely that's not going to somehow slide its way on up the chart there. You do have a 2-0 Pac-12 there in Oregon that's slid up the chart, but I just don't know. I don't know that they're going to have enough body of work by the end of the season unless the top 10 just tears each other apart, which could happen. It's very well possible. It's very well possible that could happen. But Florida has an easy rest of the schedule. Texas A&M has an easy rest of the schedule. Alabama has, for the most part, an easy rest of their schedule. Ohio State is what it is. Notre Dame, their biggest test is going to end up coming in the ACC championship when they rematch against Clemson. So it's going to, I mean, we got a lot of football to play. We're just, it's kind of strange to think that for some conferences we're not even at the halfway point. And then for others, we're getting to the nitty-gritty. We're getting to the end where there's only 3 to 4 weeks left of football to play.
Well, when you look at Notre Dame's schedule for the rest of the year, they have an easy schedule, cleaning it out.
Yeah.
Their biggest challenge is going to be next week, or the week after. No, next week, I'm sorry. And playing North Carolina, who's 6-2 on the year. And if anybody remembers, North Carolina's a team last year that about slipped up on Clemson.
Mm-hmm. And at one point, North Carolina was also ranked, I think, 5th in the country. So.
Yeah. And you look at Clemson's, their last 3 games of the year is Florida State, which should be an easy win. No offense to FSU, but they just got to get that situation fixed down there. They got Pitt, who's 4-4 in the year, and Virginia Tech, who about slipped up and beat Miami.
Mm-hmm.
Or did they?
No, Miami won it.
Did it? Okay. I know it was a close one. Yeah, I mean, Miami won by 1 point. So, right now you're looking at Virginia Tech's, one of their losses was to Miami. They lost to North Carolina, too, and Wake Forest.
Yeah.
So, you never know. And you got some teams there that can make a big change on how this season turns out.
Well, I'm going to throw something on the board for us. We haven't gone back in and we haven't updated this. Since we did it, I'm fairly certain it may have been week 1 or week 2 of SEC football play. It may have been right after week 1. It may have been just before. So this is a kind of a fun thing, and this is college football playoff. This is the teams we anticipated being there. Yours right now looks really, really good. I'm going to throw it up on the screen for everybody to look at. You've got in the 1 spot, you've got Alabama playing the number 4 team, Florida. Now, the only thing that I think takes this out of contention is if Florida was to lose to Alabama in the SEC championship, I don't see them being there. Now, if Florida beat them, I don't see Alabama being in 1 and Florida 4. So that might change. But then in the 2 and 3 spots, you've got Clemson and Ohio State. So your 4 teams there right now, I'm fairly certain are the 4 teams that they would anticipate being in, with maybe an exception to Notre Dame or Notre Dame. That may be the caveat in it all. Now,
well, I will say too.
Go ahead.
Looking at this right here, looking at this top 25, a team that to me is sitting just kind of odd right now, and their destiny is not in their hands for the most part. Just looking at their schedule, is Texas A&M. If Texas A&M wins out and they're sitting at number 5 spot, their only loss was to Alabama at the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
If Florida plays Bama in the championship and Alabama beats Florida, you have a undefeated and a 1-loss SEC team in the top 5.
Mm-hmm. Well, I tell you, I'm going to put mine up here. And this is the one that would take the miracle. I have Ohio State in 1, which is not impossible. I have Clemson in number 2, which is not impossible if Notre Dame was to fall to Clemson and they decide to keep Notre Dame out. I've got Alabama in 4, which more than likely would only happen if Alabama fell in the SEC championship game. Now, this is the miracle pick right here, and the miracle pick is if somehow Florida just boogers everything up and falls and Georgia gets into the SEC championship and beats Alabama, I've got Georgia in the 3 spot. But as of right now, more than likely that's not going to happen. And obviously, preseason, we talked about it, and we thought that Georgia would be the team to play Alabama in the SEC championship after falling in the regular season, Alabama, and Georgia finding themselves in that spot. As of right now, I don't think that these are going to match up quite as well. We can, once we get a couple of weeks down the road, maybe right there at the end of the regular season, we'll put up who we think is going to end up in the playoffs before we get to championship week, which will kind of be a little bit of a fun thing that we could put up. Just kind of see what happens. Again, I'll throw the percentages back up so far for the teams that they're thinking as far as it goes on those games.
Oh, yeah, I mean, looking at it right now, you really can't make
a lot of questions.
Educated guess on who I mean, most time by this point, you can look at your top 20, your top 10, and be like, okay, you got a good idea of who's going to be your top 4.
Yeah.
Right now, I don't say that's set in stone because of that number 7 and number 8 spot being held by Cincinnati and BYU.
Yeah.
And I mean, like you mentioned, yeah, they don't play nobody, but if I'm the committee, I'm looking at, okay, you have, if BYU goes undefeated and Cincinnati goes undefeated, to me, it'll be hard to not give either one or both of those teams a chance. Let's say Ohio State does go undefeated on the year. Well, you're only looking at a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They'll be 8-0. Or no, I'm sorry, 7-0 on the year. With their best, I mean, you got a 52 where their best win is over Penn State, and it's a 38-25 pick. Is their best win to me.
Yeah, I mean, they haven't been to 3 games, but yeah.
Now, their next game, who I think this game will determine and tell you how they look, is their game against this weekend against Indiana.
Yeah.
That game this weekend will tell you just how important this ranking is, because if Cincinnati, I'm looking at the schedule real quick. Game against Tulsa got postponed. They can go 10-0 on the season. They can go 10-0 in a regular season, and right now it's looking very possible.
And this is who again?
Cincinnati.
Oh, okay.
And then BYU's going to finish 10-0 on the year.
Are they playing 11 or are they playing 10?
They're playing 10.
Okay. So they ain't got got 2 more weeks worth of playing.
Yeah, and they're in a conference. No, they're in
they're
conference.
independent.
So they won't actually have a championship game. But I think Cincinnati will have a championship game, and they're looking to play Tulsa right now,
which is cracking into that top 25. I will say, I do think their percentage is perfect as far as Alabama goes, because I don't think Alabama loses another game in the regular season. Even if they lose in the SEC championship, as of right now, we think it's going to be Florida. I think you have to still give Alabama the nod. The only thing there is, if Alabama was to fall to Florida, in my opinion, you have to put 2 teams that are 9-1 or Alabama would be 10-0 in the regular season. Florida would be 9-1 in the regular season, depending on how all these makeup games and stuff happen. That also has something to do with it. But 2 teams that would only have 1 loss going into based upon where they've got everything ranked right now, at that point you have to put 2 SEC teams in. But then what do you do with a Notre Dame and a Clemson if they are the only teams beating each other, and then you have an undefeated Ohio State up there? The thing right now that's got it all jumbled, which college football playoff, obviously, when that committee starts voting and they do their top 25, is going to completely change things, which last I looked at, That time, Tuesday, November 24th. So we are, a week?
Yep.
We're 2 weeks away from that first playoff ranking that's going to be released. So once those rankings start to come out, it's going to make a big difference as far as that goes.
Now,
and we'll be able to tell. But right now, looking at the AP Top 25, the issue you have is you've got a Texas A&M ranked right there at 5-1. I mean, in fifth at 5-1. That if they win out, there's no reason they should have to fall if the only loss they have is to Alabama. Yeah, very well possible 9-1. So then, and that's when you have to decide: does a 10-0 BYU, are they better than a 9-1 Texas A&M who only lost to the top team in the country, or you know?
I will say that whoever wins, because Florida's one loss this year was to Ole Miss, right, or A&M.
That's right.
So let me look at that game real quick and see what that score was. And it was a close one, 41-38. I think it's going to come down to who has the best loss. And as of right now, to me, the team that has the top five that has the best loss is Clemson.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
Now, if Clemson, I will say whoever wins the ACC is going to be in automatically.
No doubt.
That's a guarantee.
I think the guarantee is Big Ten winner, ACC winner, SEC winner. Those are the three as of right now. Big Ten, maybe the Pac-12. We'll see where Oregon lands in a couple of weeks. But
I don't even think the Big 12 has a chance at this point.
No. The Pac-12. I don't think the Big 12 we have to worry about. But the Pac-12, I think, is the only other one. If Oregon was to go undefeated, that's a question that comes raised. Again, this is another reason that there's so many people advocating and pushing for an expanded playoff. Make it an 8-team expanded playoff, so you can, if you get in a situation right here where your top 8 teams, let's just say only 3 or 4 of those have 1 loss. Half of them are undefeated, half of them have 1 loss, or just over half of them, say 5 of them are undefeated and 3 of them only have 1 loss. That's where I can see an expanded playoff not only making it easier on the committee, but also justifying these teams that are in the top 8 to be in a situation like this. Because let's face it, when it comes down to it, if you're not in that top 4 at the end of the season, even if you're going to a big primetime bowl game, a lot of teams shut down. Take Georgia. I'm not even going to take Georgia for example, but there's just so many teams that when the end of the season comes, if you're not in the playoffs, that top 4 team, your seniors or your juniors, they decide, all right, I'm going to go ahead and opt out of this game and get prepared for the draft, because they don't care about the game, because all it is a bowl game where you're going to get a couple little goodies from some guys and you're going to go on with your life. Whereas if you can expand that, I think then, first of all, you're also putting a bowl in those games, which makes it worth not only the bowl carriers, but makes it worth it for the players to decide, okay, if we're expanding this to 8, all we got to be in the top 8, and we stand a chance to be able to at least get in it. So I'm for an expanded. It makes it a lot longer. It makes it a lot more difficult. And I know it's all about the safety and well-being of the players and things like that. So I don't know, but this is a year, looking at it right now, which again, we've got a lot of football to play, but looking at it right now, it would make so much more sense and make it a lot easier on everybody if it was an expanded playoff.
Well, I will say this too. You talk about the expanded playoff. Look back to 2004, and there's going to be some fans that they're going to remember this when I mention it, if they don't already know what I'm talking about. Auburn Tigers were undefeated in 2004, and they did not play the national championship, BCS championship game. But you had, I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, that would be very difficult right now to only put 2. Could you imagine if we were still in BCS where your top 2 teams were the team to play? Like, could you imagine at the end of this season if you had an 11-0 Alabama, if you, let's just hypothetically say 11-0 Notre Dame, 11-0 Ohio State, 10-0 BYU, 11-0 Cincinnati. Could you imagine that? That's the possibility of a scenario showing up right here where you have an 11-0 in Alabama, 11-0 Notre Dame, 11-0 Ohio State, let's just call it a 10-1, or at that point would be 9-2 Clemson. A 9-1 A&M. Florida would have 2 losses at that point. But a Cincinnati that could also be undefeated. You've got possibility of 4 to 5 undefeated teams sitting there before you ever even start thinking about. I couldn't imagine if there was still BCS only 2 in this kind of era where you have more than one team generally that's undefeated that goes into it. Look at last year's playoffs. I think every team except for one had 1 loss going into it.
In what year?
Last year. LSU was undefeated. Clemson was undefeated. Oklahoma, I think, had 1 loss. There was one other team. It wasn't Notre Dame. I can't think of who the 4th team was. Or maybe it was the 3rd. Ohio State. They were undefeated. So, you take 3 undefeated teams. How do you decide who gets in and doesn't? I think that's the same thing that you were making. Obviously, UCF, they're always going to have their argument for, yeah, we were undefeated, but we didn't get to play for it either. You know, it is what it is. Part of it's a body of work, again, but.
I'm trying to pull it real quick. Come on now.
While he's pulling it up, you guys follow us on Twitter at SEC Talk 20 and on Facebook, same thing, we're over there. Trying to be more active on it. Gets a little bit difficult throughout the work day. We don't do this full time. We both have jobs outside of this, so you guys bear with us as we try to put up as much information as quickly as we can, as quickly as we get it. Sometimes we're not as active, but I promise you, if you ever send us a message, like us, comment or anything on there, I promise you we will get back to you almost immediately when that happens, just because we do enjoy the interaction with you guys.
I ain't gonna pull it up. Anyways, yeah, I mean, like you just mentioned. Sorry.
No, you're good.
All that.
You're good.
But yeah, the BCS. I think it was. I'm glad that we're out of it, and I'm glad it went to the 14 playoff. And a lot of people are saying that we need to go to the 8. And yeah, it would extend your season. 2 more games. But at the same time, to me, I think it's worth it.
Yeah.
Because then you're going to get a better competition all-around players.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it'd be a good thing if they went to the 18 playoff. Honestly, this year was the best year to try it out, just because of everything that's going on. Which they still could do that. It's not set in stone yet, because they haven't released. They've released the times and all, but they can still change it.
You talking about this year?
Yeah.
Oh, I was gonna say I know they've already released the times and everything for the bowls. So the only thing that can happen this year is a 4-game playoff. They couldn't expand it to an 8-game this season, but I know next season they have all the ability to be able to take action now.
Well, I think whenever they get into the meetings and they look at it, they could probably still do it.
Nah,
Even this late in the season, I think they could.
Yeah, I don't know. I know there's a lot of money and stuff like that. TV. There's way more behind it than we know. So I don't know as far as this season goes. But let's go ahead and jump out of the talk of the playoff, because like I say, there's a lot of football to be played before we really have to, sure enough, grind down to that kind of stuff. One thing I did want to talk about is, before we jump to a fun little question that I've got for you, is Kyle Trask. If it's me right now, if the Heisman has to be picked today, I think he's the guy who wins it. No knock on like Mac Jones. Obviously, unfortunately for him, having to have another week off with the coronavirus stuff going on, it takes some from him. Justin Fields, same thing for him. Trevor Lawrence, obviously being out because of coronavirus. There's a lot of big names in there that could truly matter. But right now, I mean, Kyle Trask there at Florida, he's rolling. He's rolling heavily. And if it ended today, I think he's the guy you got to give it to. Obviously, again, like we just said, a lot of football to be played, but that he's playing with his hair on fire right now.
Oh, yeah. And, I mean, like they mentioned already that – let me see if I can pull it up real quick. I think he's actually leading the race now. I haven't looked at the actual standings.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if he wasn't.
But, I mean, at the same time, I don't because of the performances he is putting up.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, if you're putting up numbers like he is, go for it. That's great. Which I did see that they said there's going to be a virtual meeting this year, and they're not going to do.
Yeah, that's strange.
So that's going to be kind of fun to watch.
Did I see correctly that it's also going to be on January 4th? And if that's the case, that's after the semifinal games. It is before the national championship, but it is after semifinal games. I always thought it was after the championship week. I thought it was that following week, before you even get to the playoffs. I may have been incorrect on that in the years past, but
10 hours ago, this is according to Bleacher Report. Justin Fields is the bottom or Matt Jones, Trevor Lawrence, Kyle Trask. Well, that's all they want to say about it. Okay. That was November 11th. So that was before last weekend.
Oh, it's okay. We can find out. We can put it on there. We can put it on there at a later date when it comes. Well, let me hit you with a fun little question real quick if you're up for it. It's all gonna be kind of like seasonal based as far as this goes.
And let's hear it.
It's pretty easy. This week is not the week, but next week is. Once we get through this week, matter of fact, when we meet this Thursday, we will be a week out from Thanksgiving. So I want to know, what is your favorite Thanksgiving dish?
I'm gonna go macaroni and cheese.
Macaroni and cheese.
Look, it's homemade macaroni and cheese, man. Because here's the thing: is you have your traditional, you have your traditional turkey and ham and stuff, and your traditional stuff, which that's great. But to me, it's everybody's go-to. Everybody's like, that's it. I mean, you don't think of like, macaroni and cheese because it's a bait. I'm telling you, it's the best macaroni and cheese you'll ever have. Okay?
I get it. Hey, I'm all for it. No judgment here.
Because
no judgment.
Last time we asked her for her ingredients, she said, I don't have ingredients. I just do a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
Now that's pretty impressive.
Now that is a family recipe right there.
Yeah, and you've been doing it.
Until you know that's enough. It's like, okay.
Yeah, you've been doing it long enough to know. I've got to say, mine I think is going to be dressing. I mean, it's so hard to beat. It's just hard to beat dressing. I ain't talking about none of that you get out of a can or out of a box that you make. I'm talking about just true blue making dressing. There's just something about it. Put a little bit of that giblet gravy on there and just make it even better. As far as dessert goes, give me like a pumpkin pie or sweet potato pie. It doesn't matter. I like yams and stuff like that. So I love a pumpkin pie. Some people are kind of like, I don't know about that, but it's good to me as far as the dessert goes. You got a favorite dessert on there too?
My favorite dessert is actually my wife's dessert.
Now, Thanksgiving wise now.
This Thanksgiving.
Okay.
It's a pecan pie cheesecake.
Oh wow, that actually sounds good. I've actually started to get into where I really like pecan pie too.
Look, I'm telling you, you have that one, you'll fall in love with it.
Well, that's gonna be one worth.
She does a pecan pie bottom and a cheesecake on top.
Well, that's gonna be one worth trying. Then I might have to get her to maybe not shoot a recipe, but just make it one time for us.
Shoot, I gotta take one. I gotta get her to make one so I can take it to work for one of my captains. He loves it.
There you go.
One time, and every year so far, she's had to make one for him.
There you go. Well, we're right here at the end of our time mark on it. You guys follow us on Facebook and Twitter at SEC Talk 20, like I've said before. Cody, you got any closing remarks, before we jump out of here?
Yeah, let's get some input from our audience members. Guys, follow us on Facebook and Twitter at SEC Talk 20, and tell us what is your favorite Thanksgiving meal, or dinner, or food, or whatever.
Yeah,
I'm
all for it. Like I said, this is your host, Holden and Cody. Hope you guys have a good week. We'll check in with you on Thursday, where hopefully we'll have a full slate of games to bring to you guys.
And video.
Yeah, hopefully. Other than that, we're out, you guys. Y'all have a good week.